This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
This podcast is sponsored by Google. Hey folks, I'm Amar, product and design lead at Google DeepMind. Have you ever wanted to build an app for yourself, your friends, or finally launch that side project you've been dreaming about? Now you can bring any idea to life, no coding background required, with Gemini 3 in Google AI Studio. It's called Vibe Coding, and we're making it dead simple. Just describe your app, and Gemini will wire up the right models for you so you can focus on your creative vision. Head to ai.studio/build to create your first app.
I literally can't tell you the number of times that I've talked to business leaders who have spent, their companies anyways, are spending usually millions of dollars on AI. Yet, they haven't formally trained their people. And it's almost baffling to me, right? Because here we are with this generative AI technology powered by large language models, arguably some of the biggest technological shifts ever. And it changes almost daily. Yet, why aren't companies investing in their people to make sure that they understand what the technology does, understand what it can do, and the cultural and process changes needed to actually get a return on AI? So that's what we're going to be talking about today, going over the AI training crisis and why companies are spending so much money on AI, but not spending the time and the resources to educate their people. All right, I'm excited for today's show. I hope you are too. What's going on? My name is Jordan Wilson. Welcome to Everyday AI. This is your daily live stream podcast and free daily newsletter helping everyday business leaders like you and me not just keep up with the AI changes because they're happening literally every single day, but how we can make sense of them and grab the important insights to grow our companies and our career. So it starts here with the unedited, unscripted live stream podcast. But to take it to the next level, make sure you go to our website, youreverydayai.com. There, make sure you go sign up for the free daily newsletter. We're going to be recapping the highlights from today's podcast, as well as all of the other daily AI news you need to get ahead. All right. You don't got to listen to me rant about this one. I've done that enough. I'm excited for our guest for today. So live stream audience, please help me welcome to the show, Dan Lawyer, the Chief Product Officer at Lucid Software. Dan, thank you so much for joining the Everyday AI Show.
Jordan, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm pretty excited for a chance to talk with you and to share some thoughts with you and your audience.
All right. So before we get into the topic, and this is going to be a fun conversation, I think. Tell everyone a little bit, if they're not aware, what does Lucid Software do?
I'd love to. Lucid Software, we are a work acceleration and visual collaboration platform. It's used by more than 100 million people around the world. So a lot of people probably know about Lucid. We're on this mission to help teams see and build the future. And we do that through a portfolio of products, things like Lucid Chart, which is intelligent diagramming, Lucid Spark, virtual whiteboarding, AirFocus, and AI-powered product management and road mapping platform. So a suite of products that work together to just really help people solve some hard collaboration problems.
And I'll ask you this, and I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit. But even for you all personally, right? Like you said, one of the larger companies in the world when it comes to putting AI products out there for people to use. What have you all even learned internally, right? When it comes to investing in AI products, in AI offerings for yourself and for your customers, yet training. What's been some of your biggest takeaways internally?
Yeah, there's a couple of things internally that we see. One is it's actually much more of a cultural shift than it is just a retooling of the team. And of course, it's important to provide tools and provide space and time, but it actually has to be treated like a cultural shift and an evolution of the culture of the company to be a company that embraces AI, knows how to use it, has expectations and norms, and even has, like, I think of them as cultural moments where AI comes to the forefront that highlights it for people and gives them permission and expectation and things like that. So the cultural change has to be very well managed, in addition to like the security implications, the data availability, the tooling, the training that people talk about. I think that's the biggest surprise, is how much of a cultural impact it actually is.
Mm. So you have a deep background working in product at some large companies. So, I like asking people this, right? Because I think sometimes you can learn through personal stories. I've shared mine plenty. But can you talk a little bit maybe about when was the first time, or if you remember, when was the first time that you looked at an AI system and you were like, wow, kind of taken aback, but almost like not taking it personally. But when was it at the point where you were like, okay, this piece of software or LLM just produced something that I didn't think it could. And this is something maybe some knowledge that I thought I was kind of special at knowing something at this level. Do you remember that? Or, do you have any anecdotes kind of like on that kind of point of realization?
Yeah, well, like maybe I'll do that in a two-part answer. Like the first time was actually a long time ago when I worked at Ancestry.com, and back then, like we would have probably just talked about it, machine learning or stuff like that. But it's actually what we're doing is closer to what we think about today as AI than that. And so like what we were able to do to like automatically generate stories and information about people's families and help them find people is amazing. But if you fast forward to like the more recent generative AI world, things like that, I think the first time that I was able to go to an AI and it's something that Lucid had built and give it a prompt, basically asking it to, diagram out for a very complex system. And it did it and got it, 95% right. I was like, okay, like, like that's pretty cool. That like I can see how that could change and speed up the way that I work. Being able to just like the time to understanding inside was so much faster when I could do that. So I that was like a first unlock for me. There's been many unlocks now, I think.
Mm. So I kind of want to jump to the end here. So this big AI training crisis, because depending on what this, the study that you look at, there's so many, but I'd say for across the board, most stats say that, 90+%, of executives say that AI is a top priority. Right. And, obviously the amount of money that companies are investing into AI, it's in the billions, right? Yet most studies show that only a third or less are properly training their employees on how to use it. Why? Why this big gap? Why is everyone saying this is the most important thing and we'll gladly spend millions of dollars, yet why are employees not getting trained?
Yeah, I think there's several gaps in there. One of the gaps for employees not getting trained is it actually like takes a little bit of time for a company to think through how do I safely provide access to the tools in a way that doesn't, compromise our data, it doesn't compromise our IP. There was initially a lot of fear and concern about that. The concerns are still there, but there are a lot of playbooks now for how to like do that. So that part is accelerating. Then the second part is like what should I train them on? There's a broad general training of just like, well, you give a prompt and it gives you an answer and things like that. That actually doesn't take you very far in being able to get your work done. You have to go deeper and think about how to train in domain specific areas. You have to actually have a fair amount of understanding of the domain and subject matter expertise to really extract the highest value. And I actually think one of the biggest gaps in how people think about, getting value from AI, it's the combination of training, but also the expectations that like, in order to get a good outcome from AI, generative AI is non-deterministic. Businesses don't survive that very well. They need to, predictable outcomes. And so you have to teach people that to get good outcomes from AI, they actually have to ground the AI in what a good job looks like. You have to ground the AI in, the reality of like, this is how work gets done at our company if you want to automate that work. And so you need to like actually back people up and teach them, okay, you have to actually have a fair amount of documentation that you can provide to the AI about how your company works and about what a good job looks like before you can then get the highest value from AI. And so it takes some preparation and some forethought and some domain specific knowledge to be able to do it well.
Yeah, and an analogy I love, especially since I interviewed the guy who came up with the easy button, right, like way back at Staples at HP now, but it seems like that's the expectation that a lot of business leaders have. They're like, okay, well, especially larger enterprises, if they have tens of thousands of employees, and they're like, all right, well, we'll pay the the $20 or $30 a month for tens of thousands of people, which adds up to usually 7+ figures annually. They're like, all right, well, there's the investment. Now it's an easy button. That's wrong, right?
Yeah, it takes more prep. Like there is an outcome there. but it takes more forethought and preparation maybe than people initially thought. And we think about this at Lucid a lot. We talk about it as the last mile problem, right? Which is if you think of logistics, right? You build a bunch of distribution centers. That doesn't matter actually, unless you can get it from the distribution center to people's homes. And it's similar to AI. It's like you can have the AI, you can license the tool. But if you can't actually, pass to the AI information about how your company works, which requires you to actually go through and document your processes and document things and get the knowledge that's scattered across many people's heads and get it all together where people can see it. And then to make it worse, like if you pass the AI a bad process, you will still get a bad outcome, right? So you actually have to document how your company works, and then you have to refine that. And that's part of the essential training is like you have to teach people that part of what they need to do to get the most value from AI is to document how they work so that they can share that with AI, to have good examples of good outcomes so they can share that with AI. And so that there's a fair amount of like teaching and expectation setting, I think, that has to happen there.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I felt weird, back in like early 2023 saying like, hey, you need to talk with an AI, you need to teach it, you need to train it just like you would with an employee. Because I think back then everyone was looking at large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude as co-pilot, input, output, right? And not necessarily a coworker. Yet here we are, rolling into 2026. I think it's a little different now. I think people are looking at AI, especially agentic AI, as true coworkers, right? How can people get through that mindset shift of, hey, this is actually something I need to sit down with, I need to iterate, like your example, I need to ground it, not just in our company's data, but ground it in, what good work looks like. How can people get to that shift? Because it is hard to treat a non-human thing with a human-esque characteristic of working with it, being patient and sharing.
Yeah, and it even shows up like that. You see these like we've done a bunch of surveys, and you see gaps between like an executive or a leader's mindset and how they interact with AI, and how an individual contributor might interact with AI, and it really has to do with this comfort of delegating work, and this comfort of like how of like having a subordinate. I'm very used to asking other people to do things for me, and expecting high outcomes from that. I think if you take Dan 20 years ago, I didn't even think the same way. And so it takes some of that, but I think there's an evolved model that I've come to, and it's actually how we try to like incorporate into our own products is like the idea of like AI as a co-collaborator, not as a subordinate. And I think many people probably feel more comfortable with that. It's like, hey, like we've got, a sixth man on the team now that we can turn to, who we can trust, who can get things done, but we still have to give them feedback like we would any other team member. We have to do that. So I think, and I've even I wouldn't go all the way there maybe, but mentally sometimes I tend to personify my AI assistants quite a bit. I tend to talk to them as if they're real people. But then I have to back them off, because then they tend to talk to me I worry that my like AI assistants try to flatter me, and I have to tell them, I'm like, look, I don't want you to flatter me. I want critical thinking. Like I don't need you to tell me this is good, or like I need honest assessment. So I actually have to say things to AI to get it to give me more critical feedback. Otherwise, it's just telling me everything I do is great, which is not true.
Yeah.
So like there's like just like a whole work pattern that we have to think through.
Yeah, just like humans, the AI is being a little too sycophantic to try to suck up to us. So you said something there that I want to dig a little bit deeper on, just this concept of AI and maybe treating AI like a subordinate, but maybe that's not the best way in the future. But real quick, before we get into that, a quick word from our sponsors.
This podcast is sponsored by Google. Hey folks, I'm Amar, product and design lead at Google DeepMind. Have you ever wanted to build an app for yourself, your friends, or finally launch that side project you've been dreaming about? Now you can bring any idea to life, no coding background required, with Gemini 3 in Google AI Studio. It's called vibe coding, and we're making it dead simple. Just describe your app, and Gemini will wire up the right models for you so you can focus on your creative vision. Head to ai.studio/build to create your first app. This podcast is sponsored by Google. Hey folks, I'm Amar, product and design lead at Google DeepMind. Have you ever wanted to build an app for yourself, your friends, or finally launch that side project you've been dreaming about? Now you can bring any idea to life, no coding background required, with Gemini 3 in Google AI Studio. It's called vibe coding, and we're making it dead simple. Just describe your app, and Gemini will wire up the right models for you so you can focus on your creative vision. Head to ai.studio/build to create your first app.
Dan, I liked what you were saying kind of about, treating AI like a sixth man, right? So for basketball fans, or maybe if you're not a basketball fan, right, the sixth man is important. That's the person that comes in first, in basketball, and usually they can play a variety of positions, and, they're good enough to be a starter, but for whatever reasons, they're not a starter yet. What happens in 2026, Dan, when the models themselves are all starter worthy, right? And maybe they're better than all of the starters. How do we, number one, get over that mindset shift, right? And I'm starting to see that a lot personally, not just handing tasks off that I would like a subordinate, but, oh, this is if I had someone running my own company, right? And I'm taking, those big picture, answers or outputs from it. And now I'm the subordinate. Are we getting to that point? And if so, how do we prepare for that? And how do we train for that?
Yeah, and I think we are getting closer to that, but it's actually really interesting because it's very similar to how you treat another person, right? You have to earn a certain amount of trust. And similar with AI, and it's on a skill by skill or use case by use case basis. You have to gain trust that it can do a consistently good job at something. And so part of how that trust can be built is, to inspect what it's doing. It's one of my pet peeves on my team when somebody hands me something that's AI generated, and I'm like, did you even read this? It's not quite right. But so you have to do that, and to increase the likelihood of growing that trust and get there. AI does so much better if it has broad context and broad knowledge of the world, but when you can ground it in specific context about your business, about your domain, about what you do, it'll do so much better. And if you can keep feeding it a constant stream of content, just like you would another person on your team, so it stays very aware of what's happening, it's going to do better and better. So I think, you gain trust on a use case by use case basis. That probably then starts to build awareness on the team. Hey, we've actually discovered that if we, ground AI with this knowledge of how our company works, in this particular use case, it can give us a consistently good outcome. And then that insight needs to be shared across the team, and then the team can start using that and get that in there. But I'm skeptical that you'll ever get the strong outcomes you need without providing specific context to the AI.
So I want to go a little bit deeper, and maybe this would be a little technical and dorky, but one thing we keep talking about here is grounding. And obviously that's extremely important, right? When working with non-deterministic generative AI, large language models, right? That are in theory just next token prediction, right? But when you ground it, right, in your company's data, and if your data is clean and if it's organized, right? I'll say in 2024, that's a big part of what humans did, right? They made sure to feed company information to a large language model, right? Especially when we're talking about front end chatbots, right? So leaving the API and the dev talk, at the door here, but on the front end, now in 2025, all the major systems, right? They essentially have, 2 clicks, and now these systems are grounded in your company's data. Whereas in 2024, that was a big part of what AI native organizations, what the humans did there, right? They were just making sure. So now that it's, it's not solved, sure, right? But grounding is relatively simple and straightforward now. So moving forward into 2026, now that these large language models, it is much easier to ground them in your data. How should we be thinking about working with large language models when they do have access to that? And if your data is in a row, right, how does that change the role of your everyday business leader going forward?
Yeah, so there's still a missing piece, right? So you've got the data. The data is not the workflow. The data does not explain this is how you go from A to B to C to D to get the outcome that you want. And so you, in addition to having the data, you have to actually ground it in the process. This is how work gets done. This is how, this is I'll be really practical, right? So how at your company do you reconcile a wire transfer, right? Like data will not tell you that. And in fact, there's probably not a single person in your company that will tell you. You probably have to get 10 people together to answer that question. But if you can document that and pass that to AI, then the combination of this is procedurally how we work, how you get it done. This is the data set, and this is what a good job looks like. Then you can do it. So there's actually a missing component beyond just grounding in the data, is grounding it in the process, grounding in the procedural knowledge of how to get things done. And you can imagine a world where you have like MCP servers and strong APIs between all types of systems. You still have to have an orchestration that says this is how to progress the work. This is the proper sequence. Now, I think over time AI can be trained and it can learn that, but there will still be like specific knowledge in a company that is their secret sauce. So, well, we're better because we do it this way, and we don't want the world to know that. And so I think for a long time, it's going to be important for companies to augment the data with procedural knowledge that this is how work gets done. And then you'll get good outcomes.
Dan, I think you've been spot on. Just the amount of times that you've mentioned documentation, process documentation, and having your data in order. I think those are two keys that, you can't overlook. But one of the biggest issues, I think, when it comes to educating employees is the rate of change, right? If we just look at from, mid-November until now, every single week, it started with OpenAI, and then it went Google, and then it went Grok, and then it went Claude, and now we're back to OpenAI releasing a new best model week over week. We've had it for 5 straight weeks now. So, especially when companies are maybe using 1 or 2 systems and they're changing all the time. And, a lot of people don't think, when you go from a GPT 5.1 to a GPT 5.2, I can just do things the same. Well, you can't always. How can companies possibly keep up when the technology they're using and maybe everything they've learned can change very quickly without very much notice?
Yeah, I think there's 2 critical components to that. One is you have to think through how do you make it easy for your employees to rapidly access the new technology in a safe way. And so like it's like, what is your procurement process? What is your policy around what I can install on my machine? How can I do that safely and quickly? Like you have to have you almost have to have here's a fast path. And these are, the guidelines of how you can do fast path experimentation. You can't use customer data. You can't use PII. You can't, like that kind of stuff. But we do need you to rapidly experiment with new things. And then, so you need those fast paths of how you can, get people exposure to the new things that are coming. You need to provide them time and space and cultural moments to highlight it. So that's the one piece to it. The other piece is you have to know if you're getting value from it. And so you have to figure out for every kind of business function or domain we're trying to get value from AI, what is the central measure of speed? For example, and I'm tempted, should I tell you our measures? But think of a software engineering team. Is there a number that measures whether AI is speeding you up that is beyond just the sentiment, but an actual, quantitative view of is this new tool speeding us up? Or on a product team, product and UX team, that's my domain, right, where I spend most of my time. How do I measure if AI is actually making us faster at getting good outcomes? And we spent a lot of time figuring that out for our company. What are those quantitative measures that show? So that gives you a way to evaluate and say, is it just new and shiny, or is it actually creating value and speeding us up toward better, faster outcomes for our customers? And so that, I think that's the combination, right? Is allow for rapid access and experimentation, but have a quantifiable way of knowing if it's helping you.
So rapid experimentation, one of my favorite things, right? Yeah, don't spend, hours or days or weeks on something if you aren't ready for plan B, plan C, or experimenting with them at the same time, right? And Dan, I think what you said there, just about having those kind of, internal benchmarks and quantitative measurements, extremely important, especially when you're working on something a little bit more finite. Right. But what about for everyone else? What if there is no one benchmark? If there is no one measurement, on one system to see if there's, a good return, for those that are looking at training their entire company, and maybe this is something that you've all learned internally, maybe what's been some of the most successful ways that you've seen even internally on, hey, here's good ways that we can educate our people in a space that is changing weekly.
Yeah, so I think we create cultural moments that are like, and I think those like so there's things like all hands meetings or staff meetings or things like that, and we create space in all those places to highlight what we're learning about AI. All right, so like in my all hands meeting, I have a an AI moment where we are having people highlight various ways that they're seeing new value or new experiments, what's working, what's not working around AI, to share knowledge broadly, because you have many people touching it, and we need the knowledge to be leveraged. And so creating those cultural moments, it does two things. One, it shares the knowledge. Two, it gives people permission to play. And it's highlighting, hey, this is a good job. This is somebody who went and tried something new with AI, and it did or did not work, but we're like, giving them airtime and highlighting that's what a good job is to go do this type of experimentation in a safe way. And so I think like that is a critical thing, and pretty much any part of any company can figure out like where are there cultural moments where we give the airtime to AI to like start working on the behavioral change and help people realize it's safe to play. Now, you also have to create the space, right? Like expecting people to just like go home and spend their after hours doing all the learning. Like some people will do that, but I think you have to give them time and space at work to do that. And so like, can you take hackathon style approaches, or can you say, hey, we're going to have Half-Day Fridays where you're free to experiment, or things like that? So that it'll be different for every company how they do it, but it should be, I think, intentional how they do that.
So, Dan, we've covered a lot in today's conversation, everything from going over the, cultural changes and talking about data and process documentation and having the right quantitative measurements internally so you can know even what to educate people on. But for those business leaders right now who are planning out their 2026 AI education, how they're going to get it done, what's your one most important piece of advice for them to get education right in 2026?
Yeah. So one, think of the prep work that has to be done to educate, and like there's like layers to education. There's the broad general AI awareness, and the real value will come when you get domain specific, and talk about like in this domain, in this part of my company, for this business function, this is the best way to leverage AI. And then part of that training is, in order to get the highest values, you have to ground the AI in both the data and the procedural knowledge of how things work. You'll get better outcomes. So it's getting from general to domain specific to very pragmatic around how to get the highest returns from AI will help. And then creating a culture around that reinforces and supports the idea of learning and training and rapid experimentation.
All right. Some great pieces of advice, as it's, a big topic we're all trying to tackle. And Dan, your time today, I think helped us, tackle this thing a little bit better. So Dan, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join Everyday AI. We really appreciate it.
And of course. Thanks, Jordan. Have a good one.
All right. And if you missed anything, y'all, don't worry. We're going to be recapping it all in today's newsletter. So if you haven't already, make sure to go to youreverydayai.com. Sign up for the free daily newsletter. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
This podcast is sponsored by Google. Hey folks, I'm Amar, product and design lead at Google DeepMind. We just launched a revamped vibe coding experience in AI Studio that lets you mix and match AI capabilities to turn your ideas into reality faster than ever. Just describe your app and Gemini will automatically wire up the right models and APIs for you. And if you need a spark, hit I'm feeling lucky and we'll help you get started. Head to ai.studio/build to create your first app.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.